If you're struggling with your work-life balance and just can't seem to manage your many responsibilities well without sacrificing self-care, you're not alone. May I suggest our Life Balance Planner, which Book Authority listed as one of the top work-life balance resources to be released in 2021. It's a 3-month, undated planner with a uniquely integrated life balance tracking system, as well as self-care planning for your daily, weekly, and monthly routine. For a limited time, you can purchase your first planner for 30% off at paulwcroswell.com using promo code PODPLANNER. That's Pod Planner, no spaces. We're also rolling out a new feature where for just $1.90 a week, you never have to worry about buying a new planner again. How amazing is that? With this subscription, we'll send you a new planner every 3 months before your current planner fills up. To get your planner today, visit paulwcroswell.com/planner. Act now, okay? Let's dive in.
In helping her with her finances, I realized like I have a knack for it. I tend to be very practical, detail oriented, and grounded. Also, I've got all this training and the emotional side of things too, which I've found is where the real work happens in finances. Numbers is usually the easy part of it. But anyway, that work was just really powerful with that client. And as I talked with more and more people, I realized like there was this area that just there were very few people serving in this way. Like there are therapists where you can kind of talk about your money issues, and then there are financial advisors, investment advisors, financial planners, and they're very happy to talk about the numbers with you. And I'm generalizing, but most of them, if it gets into the more messy emotional side of things, they'll probably steer you back towards the numbers and where they're comfortable and where they're trained. And so I just really love doing both of those things, and I've found in the financial coaching I do that they weave together really well.
Welcome to the Paul Croswell audio experience.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is Paul, your host, and I have a question for you. Do you struggle with managing your finances well? Or maybe you struggle with your emotional relationship with your money? Either way, if you have any of these struggles, you're going to love my guest today. Today I'm having a conversation with Adam Koren, that's Koren, and Adam is a financial coach with more than 20 years of experience. He brings clarity, care, and sanity to personal finances, especially for those who struggle with avoidance around their money. In our conversation, we talk about how Adam helps his clients improve their emotional relationship with their finances so they can face what's really going on with their money and ultimately get their finances back on track and off their minds, which we can all appreciate. Side note, we also talk about how Adam came to be a world championship ultimate frisbee athlete. Let's dive into this conversation. Adam, I'm really excited to have you on. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Paul. It's a great introduction.
So let's start with Cali. Have you always lived in California? Did you move there at some point?
Yeah, I moved here 15 years ago. I'm from outside Chicago, from a suburb of Chicago. Grew up there.
Nice. What brought you to California? What triggered that transition?
Yeah, California has this mystique as being this land of opportunity, and it's still kind of the West in a way. And
Yeah.
what was especially inspiring for me was just the way that California and the Bay Area in particular is often just in the cutting edge of all kinds of things, especially personal development, which is my big passion.
Yeah. Well, that's a shared passion for us today, which I'm excited about. Because as
Mhm.
you know, that's 100% what this entire podcast is about, helping people to grow and develop personally. and providing them with tools and resources through amazing guests like yourself. Let's keep going because I'm itching to dive into some of the questions that I have for you right now. But before we dive into that, I have to know ultimate frisbee. How when did you get into that? I mean, so much to learn there.
Okay, sure. Ultimate Frisbee, learned it in college, and it's just for people who don't know, it's a sport, of course, with the frisbee, but it's not frisbee golf. It's a team sport with a lot of running. And yeah, I've been doing it. I've been playing competitively for more than 15 years, and I just love it. I play as much as I can, just because I can, because I love it. Even though I'm 42, I'm no longer able to hang with the 20-year-olds in the same way, but yeah, just feel really lucky to still be able to play.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to be something that keeps you in shape. You said a lot of running.
Yeah.
I mean, just strong cardio right there.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot of running.
I can guarantee you there are some folks in their 20s who are probably looking at you going, "Well, I can't keep up with him."
That could be. Yeah. Do a lot of
And
running.
now, when you played in college, did you play for like the team, or was it just like a hobby or something like that?
No, it's actually an interesting story. No, I just played more as a hobby, played intramurals. And I happened to go to a college, Carleton College in Minnesota,
Okay.
that was crazy about ultimate frisbee. So um, so I just played for fun, and then right afterwards, after I graduated, my best friend invited me to go on a road trip to the national championships of ultimate, and I said, road trip to, it was in Florida. I said, sure, that sounds fun. So went out there, and I was so blown away by the talent and the athleticism and the grace, and I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And that was really when it started for me.
Yeah. What was it hard to get into professionally, like to play, or what was that journey like for you?
Okay, sure. And I don't play professionally, but and there is actually a pro league now. Um,
Really?
but yeah, what was that journey like? The community tends to be really friendly, and yeah, just had a lot of support and mentorship along the way, and just played every chance I got.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you decide to pivot to coaching? Because you weren't always a coach, right? There are a few things that you did before
Right.
deciding to go into to coaching. What
Right.
were some of those things that you did?
Yeah, sure. So, and first of all, I started coaching when I was 20, but it was not like my full-time job until about 6 years ago,
Okay.
and been doing it full-time since then. But have been coaching a long time. What were my previous jobs? I actually was my first career was in promoting spiritual films. So
Interesting.
yeah, so I did that for 5 or 6 years, and then my next career was I worked for a webinar company as the director of training. So I
Nice.
gave a lot of a lot of training in how to use that webinar platform, and did that for 5 or 6 years, and in between, in both times, there was a significant transition where one thing was clearly ending, and in both cases, kind of quit, and kind of open to whatever was going to be next. And eventually, it kind of seemed to find me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's really, really cool because I'm sure we both know folks who it's genuinely a struggle to figure out what they're gonna do next. Whether it's an abrupt change that was thrusted upon them,
Mhm.
or it's they want to maybe transition careers or something, but they have no idea where to start or how to do it. So it really is sort of a blessing, so to speak. It's just a really great experience when it can happen in a
Mhm.
really kind of peaceful transition kind of way.
Mhm.
I'm sure it wasn't, perfect, in the transitions, but for it to happen in a way where it's just kind of like, oh no, this is clear.
Mhm.
That must
Yeah.
have been really cool.
Yeah, what was clear, like, with the last career as the training, it was clear that that had run its course and it was time to quit. And I didn't know what I was gonna do next. And, but I just took a leap of faith and quit. And, to be honest, I floundered for about a year and a half.
Oh
And,
yeah.
oh yeah, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I applied for a lot of jobs. Twice I got to like the fourth or fifth round of interviews, and then uh, one time it was a hiring freeze, and one time they went with someone else, and that of course was very frustrating.
Yeah.
And needed to make money, and ended up uh, just falling back on this coaching thing that I didn't know if I could really do as a real profession, and,
Yeah.
make a living with it. But I needed to make some money, and just um, in having conversations with friends and acquaintances, ended up with a few clients. And with one of those early clients, that's when I one of them we were focusing on something else, and she said, what I this is nice, but what I really need help with is my money. Is that something you can help me with? And I was like, I don't know. Let's give it a try. And because my background's not in finance, it's in personal growth and development and coaching and
Yeah.
counseling. So
That
so
is
we gave
so
it a try,
interesting.
and mhm. Yeah. So what happened with that was, in helping her with her finances, I realized, like, I have a knack for it. I tend to be very practical, detail oriented, and grounded. And also I've got all this training and the emotional side of things too, which I've found is where the real work happens in
Yeah.
in finances. Numbers is usually the easy part of it. Um, but anyway, that work was just really powerful with that client. And as I talked with more and more people, I realized, like, there was this area that just there were very few people serving in this way. Like, there are therapists where you can kind of talk about your money issues,
Yeah.
and then there are financial advisors, investment advisors, financial planners, and they're very happy to talk about the numbers with you. And I'm generalizing, but most of them, if it gets into the more messy emotional side of things, they'll probably steer you back towards the numbers and where they're
Yeah.
comfortable and where they're trained. And so I just really love doing both of those things, and I've found in the financial coaching I do that they weave together really well.
Yeah, and as I was reading up on you, so to speak, that's one of the things that just stuck out to me, and that's what I meant when I said uh, it's your approach is unique in a very powerful way because you can talk numbers, and most people can talk numbers, even the people who maybe aren't. I guess you could say like fully financially literate, like they wouldn't call themselves super financially literate.
Yeah.
They understand, when they don't have the numbers they need in order to pay for the numbers that are their expenses, so to speak. But to approach it from the emotional side of it is such a powerful thing. And so I think that is super, super, super cool. And for lack of, a better word, how did you end up kind of mixing the two? Like you said, your background is in personal development and counseling. What is that? What you went to school for? What is the background there?
Yeah, sure. So the background is, when I got to the Bay Area, and even before that, I was just doing kind of like what I was saying with Ultimate Frisbee. I was just doing everything I could, all kinds of classes and trainings and events. And, the Bay Area just has a wealth of that here. And as part of that, I got trained as a coach, and did a year-long counseling training as well. Um, and so that was the background with it. And then in terms of finances, you know, um, I was, being new to that niche and trying to figure out how to help people with their finances. What I often found was that avoidance was really at the heart of what my particular clients were often dealing with.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and what I learned about that, or what I realized is that hardly anybody gets any training in how to manage their personal finances.
Yeah.
And most people don't actually talk about it, sometimes even with the closest people in our lives. So we don't so we don't get trained and we don't talk about it. And yet just about everyone, actually every person I've ever talked with about money said like thinks that they should know what they're doing with their finances because they're an adult. I've never heard anybody say like I suck at money. Like you know, I just never learned. Like with no shame or no, I should be
Yeah.
different. Like teach me, like what do I need to know? Like nobody's ever said that to me. Like we just have this sense like we should know. And it's, so we have this expectation of ourselves and
Hmm.
it's not fair because why should we?
Yeah.
We've been kind of set up in a way. And so some people just like all of us do our best to figure it out with whatever we cobble together.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is sufficient, and we figure it out in a way that really works for us. And sometimes it's just not, and we're kind of limping along.
Yeah. And
And,
sometimes we
and
end up in
yeah,
really bad financial crisis
yeah.
because we just never got the skills. So let's talk about it. You said a few things that I would love to dissect a little bit. The first being, in your opinion, why do you think that there's such poor financial literacy taught, in school? I've heard a lot of different theories around this, plenty of which can be considered as conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing we can all admit is that there is clearly a disservice somewhere along the lines in terms of teaching, especially from a young age, teaching people financial literacy. Why do you think that is?
Mm, yeah. I don't have a good answer. To speculate, um, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's been the priority of people who are designing curriculum.
Yeah.
Um, it clearly there are lot. It seems like some of the most important adult skills just aren't
Hmm.
taught. Communication. Um, I mean, there's sex education now, but it's very limited.
Very.
And then finances. Like these are so important to living a good life. And we end up just figuring it out on our own, whatever we can figure out. So yeah, I don't know why curriculums are not designed to be more practical. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've heard so many different things. It's hard to say, um to say any of these views are mine, particularly, but if I were to nail one of them down, I'd say it's honestly just on the most innocent side, it's just oversight. It
Mhm.
is, we want to teach you how to work with numbers, period, and you can apply it to wherever you want, right?
Right.
And it's just kind of like, okay, you know algebra, you like basic math, so you should be able to look at the numbers in your bank account or whatever and figure out how to stay in the green or stay in the black as opposed to and going to the red. And I think on the
Mhm.
most innocent side, it's just oversight. It's whoever's designing curriculum and thinking through it, it's oversight, it's outdated, so on the not so innocent side, and this is where we can go into the conspiracy theories,
Right.
is that it's a pipeline for debt. And we live in a society that functions, literally thrives on almost everyone being in debt. Like we is in terms of credit scores and all of that stuff, all of which are useful, I'm sure. But we genuinely live in a society where your debt is a big part of who you are and how you function and how you navigate the world in the eyes of the government and the other, I guess, powers that be, whether it's your job or different organizations and so on. um and it's a hard thing to disrupt that pipeline and allow people to find their way to financial freedom,
Right.
right?
Mm.
And get out of the pipeline of debt. Because I mean, I literally I just had a conversation with someone about the crisis of student loan
Yeah,
debt.
that's another piece of it. Yeah.
I mean, trillions of dollars. I think it's $1.8 trillion now of student loan debt. And so many people are leaving school with, 100,000, 200,000, $30,000 in debt. And they're expected now to go ahead and one, know how to navigate that well, right? To set up their budget to be able to pay down their debt, not just the interest, but the principal,
Right.
as well as trying to build a life and get married and pay for a car and home and having kids, which all of which costs money in our society.
Mhm.
So it's very, very interesting, and I'm sure we can go for days on just different theories around that.
Mm.
But it is very interesting that there is genuinely just a very clear gap in the teaching curriculum around
Yeah.
financial literacy.
That we can definitely agree on. Um, with the question of who benefits, clearly it's the financial industry. It's these credit card companies and
Yeah.
other companies that benefit from people being in the dark about how this stuff really works. And then there are so many. I mean, kind of our whole society is built on this capitalistic kind of way of thinking in the whole advertising industry. So much is built on trying to get us to buy stuff,
Yeah.
um, and and
Yeah.
there's very little focus, support, training in like, okay, let's have a solid foundation. Like, let's really think about like your finances and like what you can afford and what you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a weird kind of dual reality happening here, because on one side, society is completely built around your financial reality, right? What you can afford genuinely shapes the lifestyle you can build for yourself and your family.
Mhm.
But then on the other side, there is this overwhelming avoidance when it comes to actually dealing with and talking about and learning about your finances. So, I guess this is the other question for you in terms of why do you think there's such an avoidance when it comes to dealing with finances? And I'm sure that there's some shame built in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the shame is one of the biggest pieces, and often based on what I was saying earlier about we don't get trained, we don't talk about it, and yet we have this expectation of ourselves. So I think that's the first thing, is that we think we should know what we're doing, or and then we don't.
Hmm.
And uh, anything that we don't know a lot about, and especially when it's important and loaded. I mean, like similar with sex, I think for many people is like there's this sense that I should be good at it,
Uh-huh.
right? And anyway, so similar with finances, it's emotionally charged often, and we don't have a lot of basic information, so that often just leads people to just do the minimum, just like take maybe a quick look at their account balances, and then shove it aside. Okay, I think I'm okay. Um, and,
Yeah.
and just because it's uncomfortable, like anything that's uncomfortable, our impulse is to is to get away from it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And you touched on something that I think is so good. There's the assumption that we should just be good at it.
Mhm.
And that's crippling in a lot of different areas of life, right? When sex is a big one, like that you pointed out, relationships in general, like
Yeah.
how to have a healthy relationship with your partner, your spouse. Like, what does it mean to communicate well, to not assume that you're going to get from your partner what you saw between your parents, or what you saw growing up, but instead you're in a completely new environment with a totally different person, and there's a learning curve there. And we beat ourselves up, or on the other hand, we kind of set ourselves up, don't we, with assumption. Like
Mhm.
we assume these things, and it keeps us ignorant, it keeps us in the dark, when
Right.
there's a lot of freedom in admitting that, you know what, I don't think I know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, and how could we?
Yeah,
So that's one of my main messages is like, there's no shame if you don't know some of the basic financial stuff. Like, there's no shame in just admitting that and being a beginner and a learner and figuring out what you need to know.
yeah.
Yes,
Now,
sorry about the internet. Seems like it's cutting in and out there.
a little bit, but not enough to where I can't understand you, and I think to where the audience won't be able to hear you clearly. So I'm grateful for that, because I think this is really, really helpful information. And as we go, a little bit further, we'll get
Mhm.
far more practical. But I had one more question before we get, I guess, more into the
Okay.
practical
Yeah.
pieces of it. Um, One of the things that often comes up when it
Mhm.
comes to money, we talked about the fact that there is a lack of teaching around it, and that there's a lot of avoidance in actually just dealing with it, like in facing the realities of it, and having open conversations about it. Everyone
Right.
develops their financial habits somehow. you know I'm going to venture out and kind of guess, that the majority of people are not learning this in school, based on based on what we've just discussed. uh in your experience, where are people getting their ideas about finances and how to manage their finances?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, similar to relationships and sex, like whatever we can cobble together. So sometimes it is talking with parents or friends or a partner. Um, yeah, often people say things like, "Well, this is what so and so suggested I do. What do you think, Adam?" And as a coach, I often turn that around to focusing on what do you want, like what how would you like this to go,
Yeah,
and that's actually a big piece of it is oftentimes people say to me, I never feel like I became an adult around finances, and I think part of what that means is like finding for ourselves, what does it mean, what do I want, what's important to me, how do I want to handle this, how much time do I want to put into it. um, yeah, and
a question,
yeah,
if you don't mind me interrupting you.
yeah, sure.
What roles would you say parents play in helping children to develop financial
Mhm.
literacy?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it's just talked about as part of everyday conversation and in age appropriate ways that kids are just kind of brought up with talking about money and talking about all aspects of it, about spending and debt and saving,
Yeah,
and ideally investment too, and how compound interest works. But
yeah,
like what in my household, uh, my parents never like it was obvious that money was important, but I didn't know how much my parents made or how much money we had, anything like that, and they were trying to protect me from comparison with my friends.
yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. But I was so curious, like I just wanted more information. Like it was clearly so important, and yet um, and yet there were a lot of missing pieces.
If you struggle to reach the goals you set for yourself, the good news is it's most likely not because you're lazy or that you lack discipline. Statistically speaking, you're most likely struggling to reach your goals because your life is out of balance. In 2017, the Harvard Business Review reported that the United States spends more than $190 billion with a B billion to address the physical and psychological effects of burnout in the average working professional. And these numbers are from before the pandemic, so who knows what it is now? The point is, anyone trying to reach a goal while navigating burnout, whether consciously or subconsciously, is not set up to succeed. This was my experience until I discovered the life balance approach to reaching your goals and changing your life. This approach to reaching your goals takes into account your life balance as you work towards your goals. Subsequently, it basically guarantees success for almost any goal you're trying to reach. And I know that is a big promise, but it is very much realistic and very much possible. In my best-selling book, Life Balance, I outlined the principles of this formula. And due to popular demand, the online course for the book is now available. In this course, I walk you through each and every principle individually and how to apply it to your life. It's a self-paced course, so you can take it on your own time and go through it as quickly or as slowly as you would like. Every purchase includes a digital copy of my book, Life Balance, the Life Balance workbook in PDF format, and the Life Balance planner, also in PDF format. For a limited time, you can purchase this course at 50% off when you use promo code PODCAST. To purchase this course today, visit paulwcroswell.com. Now let's get back to the episode. Again, I'm going to kind of venture out here, but I'd imagine there are healthy, and you said age appropriate, which I think is good, healthy ways of being more open with your kids about managing finance, right? Like even if it's how you manage their allowance, or maybe not sharing what you make, but walking them through how to budget. Maybe not what the household budget is, but how to budget, teaching them how to save up for something. Yeah, like that would be a healthy approach, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And there's one other question I had on that.
Yeah.
um and it was more so around the emotional relationship with money that we see, because I remember
Mm.
growing up, most of the times when money became a conversation, it wasn't because there was an
Mhm.
abundance. It was because there was some kind of stressor point
Right.
around the finances, right? And so a
That's
lot
right.
of people, they're growing up and they're not seeing and hearing healthy conversations around finances. They're seeing and hearing, really kind of the stress of the lack of finances. And I'd imagine that shapes their perspective, right?
I think that's a really good point. Um, I had never really thought about it that way, but you're right. Like that, if it's if speaking to the listeners here, if your parents were talking about money, if it were in this kind of calm, practical tone, it's unlikely to have left much of an impression. But if there was a fight about it, or
Mhm.
and oftentimes in a couple, like there's someone who focuses more on saving and one who focuses more on spending, and oftentimes they get together, and and so that's just such a natural conflict point. And
Yeah.
so I really like your point there that that those emotionally laden experiences of stress and conflicts can really leave an imprint and kind of signal that this is a dangerous, difficult, scary thing, and it's really important. Um, but so oftentimes people will say, I kind of learned that the, you know, to not bring this up. Like this is a difficult conversation, and would rather avoid it.
Yeah. And for the parents listening right now, before we begin to talk to them
Mhm.
about their managing of finances, is there any are there any recommendations or suggestions you would give to them in terms of maybe healthy ways they can begin to expose their kids to financial literacy, or
Mhm.
emotionally healthy relationship with finances?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me start by saying that there's a lot of good information on how to do that on Google. That's it's not my expertise. Um, Off the top of my head, what I would say is to just include your kids in the conversations. Maybe not the specifics about like you're saying, the household budget, but to just include money as part of the part, helping to orient and explain decisions, and like, you know, where we go on vacation, or um, why mom and dad need to work, age dependent. But
Yeah.
those are some of my thoughts. Yeah. Anything you would add there?
Um, honestly, I think I would just echo one of your thoughts from earlier in terms of how you talk about money around your kids. Like if there's yelling, then a lot of things are caught as opposed to taught, right? And
Right.
so if that's the only time they see you talking about money is, there's some kind of yelling or argument or something like that. That's probably not a good sign to them in terms of just how to have a relationship with money. So I'd probably
Mhm.
just echo that. I think that's really, really good.
Mhm. Yeah, I have one more thought about that then is, yeah, just handling our own stuff, especially if it is a stressful, difficult place for you, the listener, to, do whatever you have to do to get that handled, and kind of, um, yeah, just get past the whatever the obstacle is, because your kids are gonna catch, like you said, Paul, the how your approach to it, maybe not any particular specifics, but your general approach. So if you can find a way to 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 build a sense of confidence, and I know what I'm doing here, then your kids are much more likely to have that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for the average individual listening right now, let's say they've been out of college maybe 6 years or so. They have maybe $80,000 in student loan debt, and they're not necessarily confident around their finances. They're trying, they're doing their best, but they're not confident. Um, what would you say would be their first step towards just being healthier in their emotional relationship with their money?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm about to say is really hard to do, but it's really important to separate the numbers and the circumstances
Mm.
from our approach to it.
What do you mean by that? Break that
Yeah,
down for me.
yeah. Well, first, I remember when I was right on the edge, financially, of going into debt. It's really important to me to not be in debt, and yeah, earlier I was telling you about the transition from my previous career to this one, and I was struggling financially, and just getting any work I could get, um, and dipped into a little bit of debt at that time, and that was so uncomfortable for me. So I certainly know what that's like, and I was just, feeling a sense of desperation to do whatever I needed to do, whatever I could do to get out of that.
Yeah.
So that said, what I what I wish I had been able to do at that time, so I'm just saying I know how hard it is to uh, take a clear look at the numbers, whatever they are, and like, so let's take your example. So somebody's in $80,000 of debt, and they're making whatever they're making, um, and so just to see clearly, like, how much they can afford to put towards that debt every month, especially if it's somebody who has a job where it's just going to be a steady thing. Now, entrepreneurs like you and me, like, that's a little bit of a different situation where,
Yeah.
it's our income is more variable. But so I think that's so separating the numbers from the feeling, because what's so important is if we're able to come from this place of ownership as opposed to victim. Like,
Mhm.
if we can say, okay, this is the situation. like these are the numbers, and then like how do I want to be about that? Like, can I be at peace about that?
Mm,
Um,
that's
and
good.
and and is there something I need to do differently? Do I need to make more money? Do I need to spend less money? Um, and
Mm,
sometimes it's really just helpful to get help with that and to talk that talk that through with somebody, whether it's your partner or a friend or professional. That can be really helpful.
yeah. And, there are a lot of folks who get anxious around finances to the point where they really they won't check unless it's just to see if they can afford the thing they want to buy. But the idea of
Right.
sitting down with a
Yeah.
budget is a scary thought, anxiety
Yeah.
inducing thought. um do you have any recommendations for them in terms of how to begin that journey?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So the first thing we already talked about, which is just to start to have some compassion for ourselves, because how could we know? Why should we know? So that's the first thing, is just to let ourselves be a beginner or be somebody who's not very good at it.
Mhm.
There's no shame in that. So that's the first piece. And the second is to wade into it. So for some people, it's having something like a budget or a spending plan or whatever you want to call it, but to to be willing to look at how much you're spending and how much are you making, and and what's and are you in the are you in the black or the red on that, um, and if one is in the red, like what do you need to do? Is the action more on the income side or more on the spending side?
Mhm.
So like I said at the beginning, like the numbers are usually not the hard thing. Usually the hard thing is the emotional piece of it, which is how to make more money, or or where to spend less money.
Yeah. And what are some of the bigger emotional drivers? Or maybe it's different for each person, but when you're working with a client and, it's not so much that they don't have the money they need, but it's just how they manage the money they have. Um,
Mhm.
what are some of the bigger emotional drivers in unhealthy spending habits, or unhealthy mindsets towards money and spending?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear that. Say it again.
Sure. When you're working with a client, sometimes it's not so much about them not having the money they need, but
Hmm.
about them managing the money they have. And
Right.
in that, uh, I'm curious to know if you have any insight on this, but what are some of the bigger emotional drivers when it comes to poor financial habits or for poor spending habits?
Mm-hmm. Emotional drivers. Yeah, that's a good question, because that's really the center of it. Um, so, what are the drivers? Fear, shame,
Mm,
this impulse to avoid. I'd say mostly fear and shame, and that's why it can be so helpful to talk with somebody else. It can be so grounding, because it's what often happens is people will just loop in their head about their problems, and we just don't get very far when we're in these kind of thought cycles. When we're trying to fall asleep, and we're just going over and over and over again. And what's more helpful is talking it through with someone. Oftentimes, just getting anything down on paper, even if it's really simple. That's better than just having it cycle in your head. And because once we're writing something or using a spreadsheet or whatever, then we've activated the problem solving part of our brain, and we're not just in this kind of uh, thought emotion loop that's based in fear and avoidance. It's actually starting to kind of get practical about, like, okay, what is the situation and what do I need to do?
um, yeah. That's so good. Um, do you find that comparison plays a role for a lot of people when it comes to poor financial habits, like maybe what they're seeing among their friends or on social media, or maybe in media in general, and they feel like there's a need to keep up, maybe, and so they end up engaging in poor spending habits.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, and that leads back to shame also, is and again this sense of I should I should be better at this. I should be less in debt. I should be making more. I should have a better car, whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
M- Forgive me if you've probably alluded to this a little bit, but for someone who's struggling with that, where maybe they have that overwhelming sense of shame, and or maybe they're driven by that, comparison, like, oh man, I really need to keep up with my friends because they're able to afford, or at least it looks like they're able to afford X, and I haven't been able to. As a coach, you're sitting, imagine sitting with someone and they're telling you this. What would be your advice to them, you
Mhm,
know
mhm.
in this trying to keep up with this comparison trap?
Sure, sure. Okay. Good. So if I were in that situation, first I would just empathize with like wanting whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
Like let's say it's a car. And just like and what I would be interested in is how much do they want that?
Mm,
And for some people, like it's really important to them and they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to go into debt. They're just gonna have it.
yeah.
And so oftentimes desires like that can be really clarifying and focusing and kind of arranging things around whatever that is, whether it's a car, a house,
Yeah.
or something smaller. And then if it's not like that, if it's more like I think what you were getting at, which is just it's just I don't want to look bad, like if it's something more like that, um, I would tend to kind of uh, steer them back towards what's really important to you, because it sounds like that you would like this, but earlier we were talking about some other desire they had, or their desire to get out of debt or whatever it is, and um, steering them back.
I'm sorry, one moment.
We're back. Yeah.
All right, there we go. Alrighty. So that very last part again, can you just say that?
Sure.
Like earlier they were talking about getting out of debt, and then you went blank.
Yeah, so sorry about this internet. um hmm, I'm trying to remember.
That's all right. I think in that point you were really just kind of leaning into drilling into their priorities
Right,
that are
right.
internal as opposed to imposed on them.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a really important part of being an adult with finances, is really recognizing that it's my money and I can do whatever the hell I want to do with it. And whether it's to buy something that somebody might judge as inappropriate,
Hmm.
or whatever, these are my choices.
Yeah.
And being in that place of like owning myself, my adulthood, my choices, and not kind of wondering and is this okay? Adam, what do you think? It's just yeah, it's just such a powerful place to be, is in like this is what's important to me and this is what I'm gonna do,
Yeah.
regardless of what people think.
And I think in that one statement, Adam, you've just released a lot of people from a lot of
Mhm.
like guilt and
Yeah, yeah.
fear and shame, like in giving them permission to be the adult over their money.
Right, right.
Because I think subconsciously for a lot of folks there's a struggle to to live up to, or to embrace the thoughts and ideas of, well, I think this is what would make my parents proud, or this is what would make my friends look at me, in this way, as
Mhm.
opposed to, well, what life do I want for myself?
Right. Exactly. That's it.
And that's awesome. Like that, and I hope for everyone listening, as you hear that does release, some additional freedom inside of you
Mhm.
as an adult. It's your money, it's your
Yeah.
choice. You get to choose what you do with it. And what I love about this, Adam, and what you do is the emotional freedom,
Mhm.
that comes with like the emotional maturity, and the mental clarity around your money, and reshaping your relationship around your money, actually empowers you to be healthier financially, I think.
Yeah, and in all
Right.
way, right? Yeah. If we can have that approach of if we can find our way to empowerment, um, changes everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
um what, if you don't mind me asking, I'm not sure if you can, if you can answer this or not, but you can let me know. But if you don't mind me asking, what are some of the more difficult
Mm.
situations that you've had to help people find their way out of when it comes to their relationship with money?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we've touched on a few, like the student loan debt. I have a client who's in, I think, $250,000 plus
Yeah.
of student loan debt. Um,
Scary.
and yeah, and a wide range of student loan debt amounts, and then also stuff with the IRS, and
Mm,
kind of in a similar way of having a bunch of debt with them, and and having this sense of avoidance and like not wanting to deal with it, not wanting to call and try to figure out a payment plan, um, and yeah, many clients who have not filed, sometimes for many years, or they've missed a year or two, um, and then all kinds of credit card debt, of course. These are some of the more difficult situations. Yeah.
yeah. uh the thought that keeps jumping into my head,
Yeah.
and I'm just gonna kind of run with it here for a second, is there's so much growing that can be done, and freedom that can be found around adjusting your emotional reality and your emotional relationship with money, without ever really even stressing about the numbers. Because I feel like,
Mm.
we've been talking for close to an hour now at this point, and we've talked so much about these things that feel secondary, but in
Mhm.
reality they're actually primary.
Mhm.
How we think about money, how we think about ourselves, how we envision the future we want for ourselves and our families and kids. All of these things have very little to do, initially, with the number. It has to do with our mental health, our
Mm.
emotional health,
Right.
the people we surround ourselves with, that help to shape our mindset, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you ever actually walked with a client to where you might have looked at the numbers once, but for the most part, the rest of your sessions are really just talking about their emotional health and their mindset?
Hmm. Yeah, usually it's a real mix, and like with one client, we would talk for quite a while, and then we would like open up laptops and start to look at the numbers. Um, so I just find they go back and forth, they weave together, it, because if we're just dealing with the numbers, it usually like to really make any change, it's got to really involve ourselves, our emotions, our will, our heart. Um, Otherwise, we're probably going to just keep doing what we've been doing.
And that's the danger, right? That the
Mhm.
changes we make don't end up being long term
Mhm.
because we're not
Right.
dealing with the root issue.
Right. One challenge I've seen along those lines is about the 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 line between minus 0 and plus.
Mm,
So so let me tell you what I mean by that. Like, I have one client in particular who's coming to mind who I think he's probably in about somewhere between 20 and $40,000 of IRS debt.
okay.
And he is an entrepreneur. He owns his own business. He's making a pretty good amount of money. But my point is that to actually get to zero and to start to be completely debt free, like that's a line that is hard to cross because there's an identity piece
Mm,
there. And it was talking about victim and owner. Like there's a um, I think he just has some identity around being frustrated by his relationship with money and the IRS in particular. And for him to really let all that go and to really not just make enough money, but to orient his money to actually handle the debt and to be in this more uh, net worth positive place. Um, that I think that's going to take some deep inner work around that.
yeah. And
So yeah, I'm
can
sure you
you
follow with that.
spend some time defining a little bit? You brought up the term, the victim mindset when it comes to your relationship with money versus the owner. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate on that a little bit? What does it mean to have that victim mindset, or to see yourself as a victim when it comes to your
Yeah,
money versus the owner?
yeah, it's a great question. And when I say victim, I mean that's got such a loaded associations with it. I don't mean it that way. I mean, uh, like being in the place of victim is something that pretty much everybody is in and out of every day.
Yes.
If if somebody cuts us off in traffic, or your kid is having a meltdown, or like things happen and in life, and often they occur to us as if they're happening to us
Yes.
in negative things, right? And we're naturally just frustrated and upset about that. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't mean to say you shouldn't be in victim. Like that's not the point here. My
Yeah.
point is that we're in and out of victim and empowered all the time, and then there are habits around that. There are things empowered no matter what happens. If it's a place of mastery, or is it? We're good.
Yeah,
I'll,
we're
I'll
back.
just okay. So if it's a place, if it's something that I have a lot of confidence in, I'm going to tend to be empowered pretty much no matter what. And also on the habitual side, if it's something that I don't feel competent or confident in, I'm probably going to feel a sense of victimhood no matter what. Um, and so I think that's what I'm talking about with this, is if we can get both the support, the emotional support, and the information and knowledge, whatever that is that we need, then we can start to, for those people who find themselves in victim a lot around their finances, that's where we can start to shift that from victim to empowered.
Yeah. So I guess the question on the top of my mind, and probably most people's mind right now as they listen to this, is how do I get in contact with Adam? Yeah,
uh,
I genuinely believe you have a lot of value to offer people.
Thank you.
And impact, like, this is empowering people to change their lives. Your how you manage your finances can change your life, and quite frankly, your lineage, if done well, really well. So it's
Absolutely.
not a small matter.
Yeah.
So for those who are interested in connecting with you and wanting to know more, maybe they're listening and they're like, man, I think I'm in that place and I don't quite know how to get out of feeling like I'm a victim when it comes to managing my finances. I feel like it's happening to me as opposed to I am mastering it. And
Mm.
I want to connect with you and find out more. How do they do that? Where do they look?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so the first place to go is my website, adamkoren.com. Koren is Koren. And also, just for the listeners, just feel free to email me. I welcome that. My email is just adam@adamkoren.com,
Okay.
and I welcome questions, and just hearing about your situation. Happy to offer some advice that way. And then I also do consultations with people to explore whether working together would be a fit.
Awesome. And you engage on social media as well?
Yeah, I actually just started posting on Instagram just in the last
Wel-
month or two. A
Welcome
little
to the
behind the
community.
times. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So my Instagram handle is trusting life.
Okay. So I'm going to include all of those links and whatever additional links you'd like to include in the description of this episode so folks can find you as
Mm,
easily as possible, and get their journey started with becoming healthier
mm,
financially and becoming happier in life. Because
mm.
that's ultimately what we're aiming for, right? It's to
Exactly.
live a more joyful life, and you're helping people to do that
Mm.
through the service that you offer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the closing message I want to offer is that especially for those of you who hate dealing with your finances, um, what I'm talking about is not necessarily like becoming a master of it or spending a ton of time on it. It's just what do you need to do to handle it, to get it off your mind? So it may be a little bit more than what you've been doing, but I'm just talking about like what is the minimum that you can do to get it handled?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Adam, this has been such a fun conversation, super enlightening. I really hope, as folks are listening, they're able to hear and get a lot of value from it. I know I certainly did. Thanks so much for
Mhm.
this time, this conversation. I loved it.
Me too. Thank you, Paul.
And that's it, you guys, for this conversation. Man, I am so pumped about what Adam is doing, and I really hope you go ahead and check out his links in the description. Until next time. That's it for today's episode. I truly hope you enjoyed the show. To learn more about today's guests, including the links and resources related to everything we discussed, visit the podcast page at paulwcroswell.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, as well as information about my book titled Life Balance, as well as the Life Balance Planner, and much, much more. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing that you can do is subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. Also, leaving a positive review or comment is also important and greatly appreciated. Sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. Finally, for podcast updates, special offers on the Life Balance Planner, online courses, and more, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can find a link to do so in the show notes.